I'm Mike.
I'm Jason.
This is Snake Envy. We are thrilled to have Bob BLEDSOE with Green Room Pythons with us today. Thank you for coming by.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. You're here in town for Clint's Reptile Room's 5th anniversary.
Yeah, we had a blast.
Any bragging? Did you win any trophies?
You know what? I don't want to say here's the thing. It doesn't matter who won. We all had a good time, and that's the important thing. So whether I won or whether I didn't win, it doesn't matter, you guys.
That's code for no trophy, by the way. Garrett was in here the other night, and he was talking some smack.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, the thing is, Garrett tries to annihilate people whenever he can, and he's not great at it. But he really makes the effort, and he talks a big game.
But no trophy for Garrett either.
Garrett did all right. I'm gonna say that Garrett did not walk away with the big trophy, but Garrett actually did very well.
Good enough. We'll let Clint reveal the big winner. We're not going to do any spoilers, but just want to tell you, Garrett was in here talking some smack.
Yeah, I bet he was.
So listen, we love talking to guys in the hobby about where they got started. So you're from California, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are all probably about the same age. Back in the day...
72.
Back in the day...
I'm not 72.
The captive hop, not 72.
Okay,
I'm not 70.
Right.
Jason's not 72. But I was born in 71.
Oh, all right.
So, back in the day, as you know, the captive hobby, there wasn't much to it. So usually when people were getting started, their introduction was through herping and through wild caughts. Mm-hmm. Similar for you?
Yeah, not as much, except I was catching, as a kid, I was catching salamanders and snakes and stuff like that I could find in the meadow. I lived across the street from a meadow, and so I was doing that, but also I just had reptile, like I would buy a lizard at the pet store or whatever. You know, we're talking about the 1980s, 90s, where you could access reptiles. So I always had them. It's kind of the same boring story of you either did it by way of herping as a kid or just having reptiles as a kid. And I had a little bit of both.
We were both hiding reptiles from our parents.
Were
your parents supportive?
Yeah, they were supportive. They knew. I didn't do that stuff. And did Garrett tell his story? Speaking of Garrett, about hiding rattlesnakes under his bed? I didn't do any of that. My parents knew about the animals that I had. And they would always make me release the ones that I caught in the wild, and I would I'd hold on to them for half a day, and then release them. But I was really fascinated with learning about these animals, and there wasn't a ton of information. We didn't have the internet back then, and we just didn't have a lot of information. So my Ranger Rick magazine would come as a kid, and I'd pour through that and learn about all the animals. And anytime I could go into a pet store that had reptiles, I was all about it, you know. And really, when we had reptiles back then, we didn't know how to take care of them. We'd put them in a fish tank with carpet and maybe feed them the right amount, maybe not. Like, you just didn't know.
No, for me, it wasn't rattlesnakes. I spent a couple of years in Southeast Texas, but I primarily grew up in Colorado, but a couple of years in Southeast Texas. So for me, it was copperheads.
Oh.
They were easy to catch. They were relatively docile. So, my parents to this day still don't know how many copperheads went in and out of the house.
Oh, my gosh.
Because same thing. We would keep them for a while, try to get them to eat.
Yeah.
Then we'd release them back where we found them. But, so it's amazing how much the hobby has grown in our lifetimes in terms of the captive hobby. What led you to pythons?
I'm a touring stand-up comic, and at the time I was doing a lot more touring than I am now. And I didn't have, it seems like I've always had reptiles, but I went probably a good 10-year stretch as an adult without having anything because I was traveling a lot. And at one point I just went, I could have a snake, because snakes only eat once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever. I can leave the house and have so I got a python, and I got a ball python, and then I thought, I think I want to breed him, and got a female, and then I got another one, and again, same boring story that everybody else. You get one snake and then you end up with a bunch.
Yeah.
And I even before I got my first ball python, which I guess was my first ball python ever, I had other snakes before, but I knew quite a bit about them just because anytime I could get my hands on information about this random snake, I would learn it. And so I knew I had a pretty decent base of knowledge, but I had to get caught up and figure out what I was doing. And then eventually I started a YouTube channel. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially back then, how I didn't breed the first time I ever hatched any eggs was 92, some California Kings. But there was information out a little bit about that time. Was there any information on ball pythons back in the early?
I wasn't doing it in the early days.
Oh, okay.
This is my 4th season, I think, breeding ball python. I just started breeding them. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And that's why, and really, my channel, Green Room Pythons, is not about breeding. And the reason I don't do videos about breeding is because I'm relatively new to it, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I don't want to try to teach someone how to breed ball pythons when I'm in my 4th year of it. So
okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So the stuff that I feel more confident in is behavior, care, stuff like that.
But you figured out care early on, did you feel like you had a good?
Yeah, I felt like I had a good handle on care even before I got my first ball python. But and also behavior. I feel like I have a good base of just knowledge, general knowledge of behavior, but also intuitively, I feel like I understand what's going on with and not just snakes, but animals in general.
Yeah, I think that's the same story.
Yeah.
All of us, we get a good feel for it.
You get a sense of it.
I mean, it was a little tricky, getting through pre-internet days, reptile magazine days, even.
Yeah.
And but I feel like we figured it out.
Yeah.
Pretty decent back
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah.
That's actually a good segue into the fact that, and we've talked about this. We're not blindsiding Bob with this, but we did a video talking about ball pythons and how we don't feel like they're an ideal beginner snake. Fantastic snakes, but as you know, they kind of in the hobby became the go-to for first-time snake owners.
Yeah.
So we did a video. We talked about the fact we didn't think they were the ideal first-time snake. So we want to give you an opportunity to set us straight if you disagree.
Yeah.
And I think, in a way, the popularity of ball pythons may have gotten out ahead of the husbandry a little bit. They're primarily burrowers in the wild. Very few people that I've seen are keeping them that way. We know a lot of people that have kind of had bad ball python experiences, which has soured them on snakes in general, which is unfortunate. But it's not the snake's fault. It's because they went in with completely wrong expectations.
Sure.
And the ball pythons don't behave like their good friends gopher snake or king snake. So set us straight a little bit. What do you tell beginners?
So I absolutely agree with you that ball pythons are not a good beginner animal for certain people. And it's important to designate that. I have a whole video on my channel about this, that I think this idea of beginner reptile, beginner snake is a little bit... I just think it's a little bit problematic, because generally what it means is, what we're talking about is a snake oftentimes that can tolerate suboptimal conditions until you figure out how to take care of your animal. And my entire point here is that no matter what animal you choose, you should be as much of an expert in that animal as you possibly can be without having the first-hand experience yet. But just soak up as much knowledge. So you should know how to care for that animal. You should know, you should have read up and done all this stuff. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often, and people don't hear that. They don't look at a video of somebody saying that until long after they've had their first animal. But the point here is that yes, you can buy any animal, whether it's a ball python or not, and have it in suboptimal conditions because you don't know what you're doing. Treat it not understand snake body language or ball python body language. You've got one that's very food motivated, which is not super common in ball pythons, but you could have one. You get close to their heat pits and they just strike because you've gotten too close to their heat pits, that's what we call a rookie maneuver, but it's a maneuver that you can completely avoid if you do some research and understand snakes before getting your first one. What I like about ball pythons for some people is that, some people are looking for a larger sort of girthy snake, but they don't want it to be huge, and that's great for ball pythons. The other thing, the main... I want to shift gears a little bit, but the main problem with ball pythons for a beginner is that they tend to go off food. And here's my thought on this. First of all, every snake has their pluses and minuses. That's the big minus for a ball python, is that they go off food. Generally, when somebody gets their first snake, not always, but generally they're going to get a baby. And baby ball pythons usually eat really well, as long as they're well started. They typically don't start doing that going off food thing until maybe after the first year or something like that. However, you could have them in suboptimal conditions and they just don't eat for you at all because you've taken a baby and put them in a massive cage without a bunch of hiding spots and stuff like that. They don't feel comfortable enough to eat. But let's say that you get all your parameters right. You've done your research and you get it figured out. And then a year down the road or 2 years down the road, all of a sudden your ball python stops eating for a couple months. Well, you're now a keeper. You've had that snake for a year or two, and you've probably figured out what to do. You've probably seen some videos what to do if your ball python goes off food. I have a couple of videos like that. You can hopefully manage that situation. But the problems always come from keepers that have not done the research. They just don't know what to do. And for any animal that you're going to get, you got to do your research.
And the research is out there. I mean, Bob's got all these great videos, green room pythons.
Even before me,
he'll get you through those rough spots.
But
there's always been a ton. It's interesting because in the hobby, when we were getting started, a lot of us had kind of that one-on-one mentoring with the breeder.
Right.
That's kind of gone away, but the internet, YouTube, tons of information.
And that's another thing that I always say is...
But do your homework.
Do your homework, but also don't just get your information from one source. If you're getting a ball python, don't just look at my videos. Look at, you've got to decide who you want to believe and who you want to, get information from, because there's a lot of conflicting information, and that's a little tough to sort through. But it's important to not go, I'm only going to get my info from this one source. You want to be a little bit more well-rounded than that.
And if you're like me, I take information from various sources and then just mold it into what works for you.
Yes, for sure.
Kind of tweak a few things.
Because there are multiple ways that we can keep our animals successfully.
There's no one right way.
Right. Just because somebody's doing something different with their snake than I'm doing doesn't mean that they're doing it wrong or that I'm doing it wrong. We've just figured out a way that works for us. But there is certain things that is definitely not good to do for certain species, or definitely you should do for certain species, and so you have to learn those, and then within that, whatever works for you to get you there is what you should do.
Absolutely. Okay, so Python guy turned loose in the colubrid room today.
You guys have some cool colubrids.
What excited you?
So I'm a big fan of rat snakes, for one thing. Big fan of Pituophis. Pine snakes and rat snakes, for one thing, are when I go to a reptile show or something, I'm always attracted to them. I'm always going, oh my gosh, because they're so beautiful and their scalation is amazing. And coming here, I probably held more Pituophis than I've ever held in one time, just being here. And I wanted to do that because I wasn't sure what it was that drew me to these snakes when I go to shows. I was like, I really like them, but I don't know why. And I think I've kind of figured it out, that it's their variation of color. It's those keeled scales, which I didn't even realize were keeled until we really took a look at them. But then just they act so different than a python. And I will say that my black-headed pythons act like a colubrid. So it's kind of like I have a couple colubrid snakes in the black-headed pythons, but still totally different. And
lots of personality in the pit world.
Yeah, for sure. Just cool
trip,
snakes.
Holding those keeled scales, you kind of grip them a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
With that, and they don't slide right out as easy.
Yeah, it's a very different feel, very different personality. They're just cool. I like them.
Fantastic. Well, Bob, we really appreciate it. It's very gracious of you to come by.
Happy to do it.
Fantastic to meet you. What last words do you have for our audience, which is obviously geared a little more heavily to colubrids?
Yeah.
What do you want everybody to know about pythons?
Well, first of all, if you love colubrids, well done. I love colubrids too. They're fantastic. I don't keep any, but I love them. I love finding them in the wild. Pythons are great too, but they're not for everybody, just like colubrids aren't for everybody. So, I will say this because I've talked about this recently, so it's kind of on my mind. It's this thing about hobbyists going, they get their first snake, and they go, wow, that was really cool. I love the feeling that I got when I got my first snake. And they get a little bit down the road and they go, I think I want that feeling again. So they grab another snake and they grab another snake. And sometimes they end up getting way too many of the same species. Or sometimes they go, oh, now I want a python and now I want this and now I want this. And they end up with all these snakes, way too many that they can even take care of. And oftentimes some of them that they end up going, oh, I guess I didn't really look into this snake. I just got it on a whim and I don't really like it and now I just want to rehome it. Don't do that. That's my whole point. Don't do that. There are other ways that you can get your endorphins without just buying snake after snake after snake after snake.
Absolutely. Good advice. Great advice. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I'm out here in Utah, and I've never herped Utah before. I talked a big game. I wanted to herp it, and Jason over here told me it's a completely different game compared to the East Cost. And we brought Bob over here. Come on, Bob.
Ready yet?
You're not ready yet?
You're already doing your thing.
Come on, we got an hour.
Everybody.
We have an hour. You gave me the challenge of an hour to go herp.
We've got less than an hour. It took us too long to get here.
So Bob has to get on the airplane and go. So we're going to try and find as many reptiles as possible, or herpetofauna. So let's do it.
Let's do it.